I'm Topeka K. Sam, founder and executive director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. And this year, the LOHM launched the Rewriting Her Story series to highlight critical issues. Our epic vision is to end poverty and incarceration of women and girls globally. On this Rewriting Her Story segment, we are deep diving into reentry. On Saturday, August 29th, it marks the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina devastation to the New Orleans community. And it also is the grand opening of LOHM's second co-living space, Hope House. Hurricane Katrina caused an increase in housing insecurity, particularly for those of us who are formerly incarcerated. Louisiana also has one of the highest rates of incarceration on the globe. I've invited a few sisters and friends to share their expertise and experiences with reentry, financial literacy, housing, and the challenges one might experience upon creating security after living through a natural disaster or incarceration. I'm so excited to introduce my sisters and friends to the panel today. First, I have Norma Kumpian, who was recently appointed by Governor Newsom to serve the California Board of State and Community Correction. She's also the manager for women and non-binary services at Anti-Recidivism Coalition in Los Angeles. Next, I have Faith P. Faith is the Chief of Staff at JP Morgan Chase Foundation. She also serves on the board of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. Next, I have Sarita Stive. Sarita is the founder and executive director of Operation Restoration, an organization that supports women and girls impacted by incarceration to recognize their full potential, restore their lives, and discover new possibilities. Next, I have Nikki Murkison. Nikki is community development and home ownership expert. She is founder of Urban Leisure, a co-living space based out of Brooklyn, New York. Nikki is also the owner and founder of Pear Gap, a company focused on home ownership. And we have Kashana Hill. Kashana is the executive director of the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center, an organization that works to eliminate housing discrimination and segregation. Thank you, ladies, for taking the time to share with us today and to all our viewers.
Before people are released from prison, they often don't get adequate re-entry planning or discharge planning. And so when they're released, they have nowhere to go. This often looks like people cycling in and out of homeless shelters, which are just really precarious places to live. Historically, this population has been left out of this conversation, and housing is so important to the re-entry journey. We need to be building more supply of housing that is specifically designed for formerly incarcerated individuals, and they need to be a part of this conversation.
So what's interesting about the architecture of reentry is that there is no one form of architecture of reentry. It takes on many forms. And that's because no one's journey is the same coming from prison to home. The path can be overwhelming, cyclical, precarious, rehabilitative, and oftentimes lead back to prison.
We also know that supportive housing and permanent supportive housing have been shown to provide safe spaces and the resources that people need to get back onto their feet. But these spaces are really hard to get into, and there's just not enough supply of these.
And so now let's get right into rewriting reentry. Statistics show that formerly incarcerated individuals are 10 times more likely to become homeless. At Hope House, we provide housing for women and girls impacted by incarceration. We have implemented the Hope Scale model to support the women in our co-living spaces with healing, financial security, seeking educational opportunities, creating community, and establishing long-term housing upon graduating the program. The Hope Scale model has 4 pillars. H is for hope and healing. O is for opportunity and optimism. P is for progress and power. And E is for empowerment and exit. Studies have found that people released from prison are 10 times more likely to become homeless. 2017 research revealed that half of people incarcerated in prisons and 2/3 of people who are in jails have either current serious psychological distress or a history of mental health problems. These findings informed our Hope Scale model. The first phase of Hope Scale is the hope and healing phase. We focus on spiritual empowerment, self-development, and goal setting. Norma, can you please speak to the importance of spiritual empowerment, self-development, and goal setting in regards to reentry?
So thank you for such a warm introduction. I am formerly incarcerated. So I spent about 18 years incarcerated. And so when you talk about spiritual empowerment, a lot of my spirituality comes from the women that we built community together. So a real spirituality to me is when we come together, just like this panel, like these strong, beautiful women that are here today, and we come together and we just help each other out. We say, this is what happened to me. This is how I can help you. And coming home after such a long incarceration, I had so many plans, and so many of the women, we talk about it all the time, how funny it is that we had all this set up, and we thought that this was going to happen, and we were going to work here, and we were going to get a job here, and life happens. And what we really, really needed to focus on is self. And inside self, and this part, and what our morals are, who we are, what do we do when things come crashing at us? Because it's going to happen. What happens when it doesn't go according to plan? Who are we then? And so those are the things that we talk about a lot, and helping each other out by setting goals, realistic goals. And one thing that one of my sisters told me when I first came home, I was like, what do I do? What is this cell phone thing? I don't know how to do anything. What do I do? And she said, the one thing that I can tell you is you are going to be a completely different person in a year. And I did not believe her at all. I was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And she was absolutely right. Things change so quickly. And that's why it's so important to have a support system, like what you're talking about here, like who we are here to each other, and the support system that you talk about that you have at your programs. That's why those things are so important, because they really keep us grounded.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that point. I'm going to bring Sarita in the conversation, because when you talked about your 16 years of incarceration, and Sarita had done a substantial amount of time also, but that the way that I think about reentry and the things that are necessary, what people need who's done 16 years, 10 years versus 3 years are completely different.
Doing a short amount of time versus a long period of time. I went in at 19 and I got out at 29. And I often tell people, like, I didn't even know how to figure out my bra size, when I got out. I had the same struggle that Norma had as far as it related to technology. I went into prison prior to the internet, and then I was released, and everything was internet-based and email-based, and how you apply for jobs and how you do anything. Everything had to be online, and I had no concept of even how to turn on a computer. Hadn't even really dealt with one in prison at all. So that can be demoralizing to your spirit. And it can also be a great part of being re-traumatized upon release and needing to heal within your first year or so from that, and the shame and the embarrassment of not knowing certain things. So I think programs like these, the ones that we run at our organizations, help with that, because everybody who steps into, the organizations kind of knows what those individuals are going through or what the experience is. And for women, a lot of times it's really traumatic. You have traumas that have been stacked on top of trauma.
Thank you, Sarita. Yeah, because if I would just add a little bit to that, Sarita, you didn't have a computer. Like you said, there was no internet, and then there was internet. And when people ask about me, like, was it difficult for you to understand? I'm like, well, when I went in, it was an iPhone 3, and I came out, it was an iPhone 5. So much didn't really change for me. But Norma, so through the things that you've been through and in your reentry process around the spiritual healing, how did all of these things help to inform the work that you do now at the Anti-Recidivism Coalition?
Just like a little bit of what Sarita was saying, is that the needs of women are really different. It's a lot different than from men. And oftentimes, while I was incarcerated, we would joke around that we were treated like small men. We got like just the men's shirts, but a little bit smaller. The bras, there was some torpedo bras happening, and we weren't sure who made them, where they came from. So things like that always happen. And in reentry, at least out here in California, there's a larger amount of men who are paroling. Sure. There's a smaller amount of women. However, our needs are different. We're often the caregivers. Oftentimes when we are reunited with our families, our brothers or sisters are like, here, it's your turn to take care of mom or dad. So we're often burdened with, not really burdened because we love our families, but not only are we trying to get our foot in the door of an employment, not only do we have a background check to go through, not only are we looking for housing, not only are we trying to get some therapy, but we're also have the added of taking care of children, not just our own, but our families, our friends, and people who took care of us while we were gone. So we really have like that added part to us. And then for women who may have been separated by their children, they have to fight like hell to get those children back. And the system in California, it's not set up to say, it's not trauma informed, where they're like, oh, I'm so glad you're home now, Topeka. Yes, your child was waiting for you. It's more like jumping through hoops and visiting a social worker and going to foster care. And, oh, you, this is very shameful. And that kind, it's not trauma informed at all, where with us having been through it and being system impacted, we would treat each other with a higher level of dignity. And so those are the things that we're fighting against. And a lot of times women, not always, but a lot of times we deal with in relationships. We like to build relationships. We like to be friends. We like to bring our girlfriends to things. And that sometimes is missing from the reentry space, in that it's a solo kind of, re-enter. And we for the most part, not always, but we for the most part like to take our girlfriends with us to things.
This is true. So let me ask you, with the work that you do at the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, ARC, it says that you work on women and non-binary services. Can you explain to the people watching what non-binary is?
So that's just for folks who are fluid in their gender. So for those of us that were incarcerated, it's very normal for us that there's some women who look like your typical woman with makeup. There's some women that are different variations of that. And so what we did was we wanted to leave space for non-binary, for however someone wants to describe themselves. So we have people going into women's prisons and deciding that they want to be transgender, that's who they are. And they're actually in California being given the space to be able to do that transition. And so we wanted to use that name to encompass everything, so that when people come home, that they feel like, I belong here.
Thank you. I think that's such an incredible, incredible work that you do, but it's so incredibly important also that when we speak about women, we're talking about all women. So whether it is a transgender sister, we house transgender sisters, whether it is providing services. I know Operation Restoration has services, and everyone can talk about the work that they do, but the idea when you focus on giving space and giving opportunity to women and girls, it is all women and girls. So I think that it's important that as we are raising these issues, even when we see what's happening right now in the country around racial justice, gender justice, that we are making sure that we're including all women who are impacted by incarceration. The unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated people is nearly 5 times higher than the unemployment rate of the general population in the United States. We address this through the second phase of the HOPE scale model, which is opportunities and optimism. We focus on financial literacy and entrepreneurship. Faith, can you speak to us about the financial challenges that people face as a result of incarceration, and what tips do you have for people trying to overcome these challenges?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Topeka, for your leadership and the work you're doing to support formerly incarcerated women and their families through initiatives like Hope House. It's really important and powerful work. So you talked about the unemployment rate, and we also know, and research shows, that involvement in the justice system, it exacerbates social inequality, and it also widens the pervasive wealth gap that we already see among Black and white families. And so when we start to look at things like the unemployment rate, like we started with, there really isn't the best tracking mechanism for actually looking at how many people in this country that were formerly incarcerated, like looking at their unemployment. It's actually pretty difficult to track. But back in 2008, there was some research that was done that talked about the unemployment rate for people who have been previously incarcerated, it was around like 27%. So can you imagine the unemployment rate today in 2020 in the midst of a global pandemic? And this is important because formerly incarcerated people need access to stable jobs and careers just like the rest of us, right? They need to take care of themselves. They need to build wealth. They need to take care of their families and contribute to strengthening communities. And so without access to quality jobs that actually lead to careers, like this can be a huge barrier for people who are returning home. When you start to look at other things like the number of formerly incarcerated people who actually have wealth building assets like a home or even access to credit cards or, very basic assets like or access to tools like a bank account, right? Like those things become huge barriers that really like stifle them. It stifles their families and they're unable to build wealth. And so those are just some of the few economic consequences of incarcerations that people have to deal with when they return home. And it doesn't just impacts them, it also impacts their families. It starts this cycle of poverty that many Black families aren't able to get out of. You start to look at court costs, you look at fines, you look at fees. And these things often are huge barriers for people as they're returning home. And so you can start out and you can try to, you get that first job and you're trying to open a bank account and then you're hit with a court cost or you're hit with a fine or, maybe there was a debt that you had previously or a family member had a debt. And it's hard to really climb out of this cycle.
Thank you so much for that, Faith. And I know that we talk all the time about just how the impacts that it has financially on families. And, I want you to talk a little bit about just your own experience and what that was like for you and your siblings.
I always like to share, whenever I'm in forums like this, I like to always share a little bit about my mom and my own personal story. And my mom actually was in and out of jails and prisons until I was about 16 years old. And all of my siblings, we were all separated. So we all grew up in different households. I grew up in North Carolina. My siblings grew up in, different parts of New York, but we all lived with different family members. And, my mom was released when I was about 16 years old, and she actually went into a program very similar to Hope House. So she went into this program when she returned home. They helped her, they helped connect her to a job opportunity. I think her first job coming home, she worked at Burger King. But she worked at that job very hard. And I remember she got me this beautiful necklace when I graduated high school. And she was so proud because she had worked so hard to get me this gift. But my mom, not only did they connect her to a job opportunity, but they also connected her to education. And so my mom went back to school. She was eventually hired by this same program that she went through. And that was over 20 years ago. And my mom still works for that same program today. And since then, my mom has gone on to get her bachelor's degree. And just this past year at 64 years old, my mom got her master's degree. She still works for that same job. She's now the assistant director of the program that gave her that second chance whenever she was released. And it helped, that program also helped reconnect her with her children. Programs like that and programs like Hope House and the work that you guys are doing, but just for me as, the child that's outside looking in, to literally watch her, start from returning home and just working hard, no matter the barriers and the roadblocks that were placed in front of her, going back to school, getting that job opportunity. Like my mom works around the clock, but she does this work because she's so passionate and she cares about it. But what's more important is there was an organization that believed in her. And if other corporations and if other small business owners and other organizations just did more of that, if they invested in people and gave them a second chance, you would see more stories like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I saw Sarita, it looked like you were trying to jump in at some point. So can you add?
I just wanted to add to the statistics part of it, how we are framing this conversation around women and specifically, for me, women of color, that the unemployment rate for women of color, Black women specifically, is actually 44%. So that's higher than any time that this country has been in a depression or anything else, because at the height of the depression, it was only 37%. So Black women who are released from prison, 44%, 1 and 2, essentially, will be unemployed for a period of 5 years. So I think that is something that is often left out of the conversation as it relates to people who have been incarcerated and employment. Again, how it affects women differently than the ways that it affects men. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much for that, Sarita, even breaking the statistics down even further. And so now, we're in this post-COVID world, and you think about the impact of COVID on women and mothers in particular, and then you add, women who were previously incarcerated. Women who were previously incarcerated, I'm sure, are more likely to be frontline workers. And so, if they're reunited with their children and they're trying to find childcare during a time like this, you're just seeing all of these barriers that are compounded by this global pandemic, which is why we need to be rethinking, of course, the childcare system in this country, but also how we support women when they return home and connecting them to employment.
Some examples of workshops that we offer the women are Music to Your Life, Art Therapy, and Movie Night. Music to Your Life is an anthem that you play as a woman in your head when you need to feel empowered, when you feel swaggy, when you feel like you're the most beautiful woman on earth. It's beautiful to have to actually see the women participate in the exercise. The art therapy provides a woman to go through each phase of her reentry, from her being incarcerated, from her reentering back into society, and what does her goals look like within that crystal ball. We all have a crystal ball, we all dream, and we all dream big. There's no limitations to what you want to do and what you want to achieve. When me and Tammy went back and forth on what movies we should pick, we had to reflect on what type of trauma have these women gone through for them not to be triggered while they're watching these movies. We chose to have therapeutic movies that will help them add to their healing process. For example, the Eddie Murphy movie, 1,000 Words. This was a man that wasn't unable to speak because he would lose life. However, he had to learn how to forgive in order to be renewed. And that's what we offer to these women, how to be renewed, how to forgive from our past, our present, which just dictates our future.
And so our third phase of the Hope Scale model is P, which is Progress and Power. We work with women to develop power, personal power through advocacy, build connections, and strengthen relationships. The LOHM has partnered with Operation Restoration in New Orleans to offer an array of services to women of Hope House. Louisiana has one of the highest incarceration rates on the globe. Incarceration also drastically impacts families. 80% or reportedly over 80% of women in jail are mothers, with a huge reason as to why the LOHM and Operation Restoration focuses on efforts for women and girls specifically. So Rita, can you please explain why the partnership between Operation Restoration and Blaze of Hope Ministries happened and why for Hope House?
The reason that we decided at Operation Restoration to enter into partnership with Hope House is because, I've been there from the beginning to watch Hope House grow into what it is and what it has now become. There were some really good models, some really good things that you set in place, and we knew that housing was a huge concern. The thing for us was that we really knew that housing needed to be a focus of the organization, and we really felt like you and the Ladies of Hope Ministries were doing a really great job around it, and we wanted to partner with you all to bring some of the programs and models down here to New Orleans. We went through this period where we had about, in a 3-month period, about 60 to 70 women that came in, and they were all experiencing some level of homelessness, and 100% of them were mothers. So for us, we started to place women in, Airbnbs and hotels. We got certified to be able to enter women into the homeless management information system here in Louisiana, and got qualified to be able to write homeless letters and just things of the sort. And it really became we were responding to a need without really thinking about long-term, what did that mean? So building on the success of Hope House in New York, we really wanted to bring that here to New Orleans and start to provide a stable living environment for women for a period of time, while the thing that we do really well is case management services inside the organization. would be able to say, hey, now that you have stable housing for XYZ amount of time, let's work on education or family reunification. Let's work on getting you employment or whatever the need is that that woman is seeking to have met, childcare, whatever the needs are. But none of those things could happen if you don't have a safe and secure place to live. So that was why it was extremely important for us to partner with the Lady of Hope Ministries on this particular project.
Thank you so much, Sarita. It's this honor partnering with you. You are leading organization in the case management support services. I must say, I learned so much from the work that you are doing and the supports that you give to the women in New Orleans. And you did talk about relationship building, strengthening that with women and their families and the communities. But can you talk a little bit more about why that is such a crucial part of the reentry process?
I think that people don't even understand how isolating being incarcerated is. Like, you're ripped out of your family unit, your situation, you're thrown into prison, and you have to now balance living inside of prison and outside of prison. And if you have extremely long sentences, as Norma, alluded to earlier, it's really hard to maintain those connections outside. I often talk about, women don't get as many visits as men. It's astounding how when you go into a male visiting room, it's packed. They have to ask people to leave. But I can remember the 10 years that I was incarcerated, the women who got regular visits, because there was only a few of us who were incarcerated. So a lot of times women are mothers from prison and they don't want to put an extra financial burden on the caretaker of the child that is taking care of their children while they're gone. So women normally go without visits or seeing their children while they're incarcerated. So a lot of those relationships become superficial. You don't want to talk about anything too heavy. Talk about the weather and sports or world events, but nothing substantive. And then you build a family inside a prison, and then you're released and you're expected to leave that family that you've built inside of prison and you're placed back into the community. And you have family that love you and care about you, but you don't know them, they don't know you. And here comes another isolating, grieving experience because you're unable to communicate with the individuals that you're incarcerated with. And then here in the state of Louisiana, parental rights can be terminated within 18 months. And it's completely subjective. So you can wake up one day and have your parental rights, and then the next day, if the judge decides, you can have your rights terminated. And what that sets in place or puts into motion is, in order for women to build their relationships back with their kids or gain custody of their children again, the first condition is stable housing. So if you can't get employment in the state of Louisiana because of all of the laws that, the 4,000 barriers that they have against people who are formerly incarcerated returning to the community, you can't get employment. How are you going to get stable housing? And if you can't get stable housing, then you cannot reunify as a family with your children. So that was another big part of partnering with the Lady of Hope Ministries for stable housing, because that is the number one thing that you need to initially reunify, your family, and trying to get to know the people that you are blood related to while trying to get to know yourself, and then also grieve the relationships that you left in prison, can become a lot. So having a support system of women who have been through the same things as you to walk you through that process is extremely, important. So one of the things that is also awesome about the Lady of Hope Ministries and Operation Restoration is, the majority of the staff is formerly incarcerated women. And that was very important for us to make sure that those things were in place in the partnership as well.
Thank you so much, Sarita. The work that you're doing on Operation Restoration in and of itself is incredible, and so excited that we partnered on this project of Hope House NOLA, the first of many to come. The final phase of the Hope Scale model is empowerment and exit. We assist our women in securing stable, affordable housing and returning into their communities and beyond. And so, Nikki, first I'd like to add about Nikki Murkison is how I even learned about co-living spaces and reframing safe houses or reentry houses to co-living spaces was from Nikki. When we talked about how are we thinking through really changing narratives, it was like, how can I say that I'm creating a transitional home or reentry home and think that the community is going to actually understand what that means? And what the sisters are doing, they are co-living. Right? They're living together in a community setting, same things as college students do. And when she told it, just kind of this light went in my head and I was like, oh my God, you are so right. So thank you, Nikki, for your nuggets. But my question for you is, can you please tell us about the changes that arise for people with records when it comes to home ownership or renting, and why is stable housing, in your opinion, so important?
So one thing I want to say is, I just want to commend you for all the work that you're doing. I'm happy that you were able to incorporate co-living into your spaces and create these communities of people who want to grow, who want more, and who want to live their lives to their fullest potential. So with your question, as far as are there any challenges for an approval for a mortgage if you have a record, the great news is that it's probably harder to rent an apartment than it is to actually buy a home because of background checks. And the great thing about mortgage applications, it's a universal mortgage application, so every lender uses the same mortgage application, and there are no questions on that mortgage application related to a criminal background. There are a few questions that they ask regarding if you have any lawsuits or any bankruptcies or any judgments against you, but nothing relating to a criminal background. So it's, again, easier to actually buy a house in terms of background checks than it is to buy a home.
So I'm happy that you said that, and I'm glad that you emphasized that, because so often there are these, lies that we're told, and then it also, prevents us from wanting to move forward or thinking that we can buy a house. Oh, I don't want to go through this again because I finally got into this apartment and this person finally accepted me understanding XYZ. So I don't even want to go through the process, because it is traumatizing to consistently be denied for something that you should feel is your right, because someone else feels that, something that may have happened 3 years ago, 10 years ago, or 16 years ago is who you are today, right? So thank you for that.
No, absolutely. I think it has to do a lot with, generational things too. So if you come from a family of renters, you may not even consider home ownership because, no one in your family has purchased a home. So it's really kind of shedding all of those things that you grew up believing, and really just coming into the reality that you can do anything you want or achieve any goal that you set forth.
Thank you. And when we think about systemic changes needed to fight housing insecurity for formerly incarcerated people, but just for people who are living in poverty, or to your point, what I just heard you say, family, the way families just rent and they don't buy, and how there's an income gap. And, even right now, when I was talking to Dave, shout out to Dave Forbes, the lender, about acquiring more property, it was like, all right, well, right now during COVID times, right? All of the barriers that are now being placed, you have to have 18 months worth of capital in the bank that will cover the amount of your mortgage payment per month. I'm like, who has that, right? Or that you have to have, after you just buying a property, you have to have 20% down for an investment property, like all of these things. And I'm like, wait a minute. I want you to talk a little bit about pair gap and how that actually solves some of these issues for now and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I can say, education is key, because again, we believe all of these things we grew up thinking, and really education is opening up doors, because now there are different programs out there that can help you. Now that COVID has happened, there are a lot of barriers as lenders try to figure out what we're going to face ahead. But I think now's the time to really start working on your credit. So one thing I want to say before you even start working on your credit, changing your mindset, really believing that you can purchase and that you can start to create wealth for your family, and you can be one of the first ones in your family to still be able to create that generational wealth. And home ownership is the easiest way to do that, because everybody has to pay to live anyway. So my goal for my company is, if you cannot purchase on your own, we are in a shared economy now, and we are sharing everything. We're sharing our homes, we're sharing information, we're sharing even in a birthing process, right? So if you can't do something on your own and someone else has something to bring to the table, people are coming together. So really embracing the fact that you can create a community and join together to accomplish whatever goal you set forth. So education, being able to believe that you can actually own an asset, and then also being open to this sharing economy and coming together to accomplish your goals.
Thank you so much. And Kashana, I know that, look at that smile. Kashana, I know that you're in New Orleans and work with the Fair Housing Action Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that work and what off of what Sarita was talking about, barriers around the issues for formerly incarcerated people, specifically around housing in Louisiana?
First, want to thank you and thank everybody who has put this event together. I am so excited to be here and so grateful to have received the invitation. The Fair Housing Action Center has been around since 1995. It's a nonprofit organization that works to ensure equitable access to housing opportunity. I came in as executive director in April of 2015, the fourth executive director and the first Black woman to serve as executive director. For me, the work that we do, particularly as it relates to housing access for people who have been incarcerated or for people who have had involvement with the legal system, feels very personal, right? I don't know a Black person that has not been impacted by involvement with the legal system, whether it's, us personally or people in our family. And so I bring all of those experiences into the work that I'm doing and into the work that the organization that I lead does. And, I was really struck listening to Sarita talk about how Operation Restoration began doing this work responding to a need. Operation Restoration is just so critical in terms of services in this community, because there really is a large need for services that are focused on women and girls, non-binary people. And I would say specifically as we're talking about access to housing, in the Deep South, right? There is a lot of structural inequity that's present here in New Orleans, in Louisiana, that is baked into many of our systems. And those systems all work together to continue to oppress Black women, to continue to oppress, girls of color, trans and non-binary folks. And so there's been a need to make sure that these folks who are often the most marginalized are really protected and do have the support and the systems that they need in order to be successful. Something here in New Orleans that becomes very difficult to get past is access to housing. We're a city that is majority Black, right? So 60% of New Orleanians are Black. And we know that for all intents and purposes, all of the public housing residents and all of the voucher holders in the city are Black. So there's a very large correlation between race and poverty and access here. And then I think as we heard Faith talking about the connections and intersections, right, between all of these policies and systems that oppress. And once you add that involvement with the legal system in, then that just leads to further disenfranchisement and marginalization. So what we see are a lot of factors that really combine to deny housing access. The screening procedures are a huge barrier for people who have had involvement with the legal system. That is going to relate mostly to rental housing, as Nikki was just mentioning, but in New Orleans, the majority of the residents are renters versus homeowners, right? And I would suggest that home ownership in New Orleans looks a lot different in terms of who can access it, just because we do have such a large amount of our population that's living below the federal poverty line. So when we talk about screening procedures, we know that there is a real need to kind of reimagine what safety looks like, right? And reimagine what people need in order to be successful. One of the things we found within my organization, that screening procedures are often applied in a racially discriminatory manner, right? So when we hear about screening procedures from housing providers, we hear that, landlords need to protect their properties and the tenants and the communities, but they don't really seem that interested in protecting their communities if we're talking about a white person who has had involvement with the legal system. So we know that idea that these screening procedures make communities safer is BS, right? It's not true. And we actually see and have been doing some litigation around the fact that some housing providers are applying these screening procedures just to Black folks. We've had housing providers, tell our investigators, oh, well, I only run those, background checks when I think the renter might cause problems or might, cause trouble, but they don't do the same thing for white tenants. So there are a lot of systems in place that really need intervention in order to ensure success and equity here in New Orleans.
Well, thank you so much. Wow, that's just blew my mind. I know when I came to New Orleans for the first time, I fell in love with the city. And when I thought about Hope House and doing Hope House, it's so funny because I had all of these stops on my little map when I was incarcerated, and it wasn't New Orleans, but yet New Orleans was the second place we opened because of not only just the need, but just the culture in the city. Unfortunately, what I have learned, and I know Saria can talk about it, is that from the communities that we even go into or come back to, there's discrimination that we get. Right? So like in the Bronx, for example, the neighborhood is a predominantly neighborhood of color, but middle class neighborhood, all residential, all homeowners. And so we felt, because in the Bronx in New York, that's where the most people who come back from prison and re-enter come back to the Bronx. That's the borough, number one borough. It's also in the district to where Rikers Island is. And so we thought, and food insecurity is the highest in the Bronx. So all of these things. So we thought having us there would bring value and that the community would be so happy. And that was not the case. It was a huge fight. Like, oh, what you're doing is great, but not in our backyard.
I did want to just say something else about that, the not in my backyards attitude, which is so prevalent very often in communities that are majority white, but sometimes it can even be present in our own communities. And, I've just been so happy to see Operation Restoration, just continuing and moving forward with the Hope House. Dolphinette Martin at Operation Restoration is not here with us today, but, I was so excited when I heard what was happening and what was coming, because this need has been so great. And, I told Dolphinette, I'm gonna stay in the background, because I partner as needed. But now if we need to talk about a lawsuit, I'm ready to do that too, because this kind of entitlement and this real need to try to keep communities and make communities exclusive is something that anytime you have an organization that is supporting oppressed people, they get this kind of reaction, unfortunately. And so I do just want to give a plug and like a shout out, for the litigation that is sometimes necessary, and I just really appreciate that us as women of color have all of this expertise and this variety of ways to continue to beat these systems. So I just appreciate this community and holding this space with you all.
Well, thank you.
I'm gonna call you on the side because the litigation is coming out. I grew up in the courtroom. My mom is.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Me too.
I'm ready.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I think that goes without our E for exit and empower. So thank everyone so much for this great conversation. I definitely want to give everyone an opportunity just to say maybe like in 20 seconds, just something else that you want to add around the importance of reentry, the importance of sustainable housing, the importance of financial security and building wealth, whether it's where you are in your local areas or national. So I'll start with, let's see. I'll start with Norma. Norma, you started first, so I'm going to start with you again.
Thank you for letting me be here and listening to all of you very wise women. I really enjoyed myself. And I think my parting words would be to your audience to just really consider giving someone with a background a chance, whether that's a small part-time job, whether that's a small opportunity, and watch the growth. So I would just ask you to consider giving opportunities to formerly incarcerated. And I can't wait to see you guys and actually maybe one day hug. 2021 will be our year.
2021. I'm hugging now, but I know everybody's not happy about that. Let me not say that too loud. COVID times. With a mask on. I hug with a mask on. And Faith, well, I know, not look, too soon. Faith, can you give us some party words, please?
Of course. Thank you so much again, so much. I learned so much in this call from all of you. You all are really amazing women doing some really incredible work. And I just want to echo Norma's sentiments that it's all about second chances. You know, I shared my mom's story and, I talked a little bit about kind of, financial health, but it was all, when we look at all of these threads, they all connect back to giving people a second chance, no matter their background, no matter where they come from. And there is power in second chances. I'm like living a living testimony of the power of second chances. And so I think that's important. And that's kind of the most impactful part of today's discussion is just hearing all of you women and the work that you do to empower other women and give them second chances.
Thank you so much, Faith. And Sarita?
It's been amazing to be here and listen to everybody speak as well. I just have to tell you, Faith, in the words of my coworker, Dauphinette Martin, one thing that she says is thank God for another chance, not a second chance, because she said she didn't have like 13, so she needed 13 to get it right. So thank God for another chance. So, what I wanted to say or add to it is that if you are listening and you are wanting to give someone an opportunity, I think what makes our organizations, ARC, Lady of Hope Ministries, the Fact Action Housing Center, just all of the other different organizations that are invested in, helping with oppressed people, is that we are really invested in the opportunity. If you give someone an opportunity, but you're not invested in making sure that they can take advantage of the opportunity, it's as if you haven't given them the opportunity at all. So when we connect someone to employment, we also ask questions like, do you need help with childcare? Do you have a bus pass for the first 30 days until you're able to get your own transportation or things of that sort? Because we think a lot of times that if, hey, we give a person a job, that they'll be okay. But that's not always the case. So I just really encourage the listeners to make sure that if you are giving opportunities to really, really, really search within yourself to say, have I done everything to make sure that the person that I am giving this opportunity to can take advantage of the opportunity?
Thank you, Sarita. And Nikki?
Yeah, I just want to encourage, a lot of the work that I'm doing is working with working class. In my previous position, I worked with a lot of low to moderate income residents, and there were a lot of programs to help purchase homes, but there wasn't anything for the working class person. And with COVID, there are a lot of people that was affected and they're not working, but there are a large segment of the population that are still working and that can afford to buy homes and don't even think that they could. So I want to encourage people to just get pre-qualified to see where you stand. That's the first step. And then once you see what you need to improve in order to get approved for a mortgage, then start working on those things while the market is stagnant, so that once we're back up and running, you're able to move forward. And again, everybody has to pay to live. I just want to encourage people to own living.
Right, because the reality is it's cheaper to own than it is to rent. I'm just gonna say that's the truth. So
I just closed on the house 2 weeks ago, so I'm excited.
Congratulations. And that's the type of stories that we need to share more of, especially with your circumstances. And now you were able to come out, thrive, and own a home, an asset that you can continue to build wealth for your family. So congratulations.
Absolutely. So super excited. Can't wait to see it when I get there. Can't wait. And Kashana.
Yeah, I would just say, as I'm hearing, everybody talk about chances and opportunities, I just hear this common thread, right, of demanding that our humanity be respected, right? People don't lose their humanity because of a conviction or because of some involvement with the legal system. And so it's just important as we think about how to do this work and breaking down these barriers, that we just continue to raise our voices and demand that people's humanity be seen seen and respected. And I just appreciate the work that you all are doing to ensure that people's humanity is respected. So thank you.
Thank you, Kashana. We appreciate you too, especially litigation. I'm gonna add that again.
It's just sometimes you gotta do it.
Just gotta do it.
Yeah.
And so that is a lot of hope for everyone from what I see and what I've heard today.
My name is Dauphinette Morton. I am the Housing Director at Operation Restoration, and I am also the manager of Hope House NOLA, a co-living space for formerly incarcerated women. It is essential to have a co-living space like Hope House NOLA in New Orleans, one, because there's no other co-living spaces with this model, and they're here in a safe house is what we choose to call Hope House NOLA. It's a safe living space for women to get back on their feet and transition back into society. The resources that are vital for women and girls upon reentry, in my opinion, would be first, safe housing, somewhere safe to lay their heads at night. Second, employment and education. The two go hand in hand. Then family reunification, medical and mental health. All of those things are needed to have a successful reentry based on what we call successful. But the most important being housing, employment, and health insurance. Our mental health is so important because if we're not healthy within, the family reunification piece will not happen.
We are back and we are still talking reentry. This panel has been incredibly informative, and even I have learned so much from each and every one of these brilliant and beautiful sisters. As you can imagine, so much time and love goes into picking a home, designing it, and even ensuring all the needs of our co-living space are being met for the sisters that we know are going to share it. This makes my heart so full, and I'm super excited to give you a grand opening tour of Hope House New Orleans. Okay, so this is the first floor bedroom. This originally was to be used as an emergency room for someone who may need to just stay for a short period of time in the interim that there is no additional housing or other opportunities through the emergency assistance program that Operation Restoration already has in place. That's Dauphinette's office. This is the common area or living room area. This is the only place in the house that has a television. And we have one upstairs. Typically, we like to just put the TV in a common area to have people to come in together to build community and have some space together. Dauphinette discussed how she'd like to do like movie nights and things like that. So it's a huge space, enough space to where when we get to capacity, which hopefully will be about 8 women, we'll be able to have them in those spaces. The kitchen, everyone cooks for themselves. Now at this New York Hope House, they do a monthly dinner where one of the ladies in the house cooks and they come to the table and they share about the things that have gone on throughout the month. This, of course, the sitting area for the kitchen. Try to get long tables for either a community dinner and or like a workspace so that people can come together if they're doing any work from home, and especially now with COVID, that's definitely gonna happen. Backyard, pool. So that's the bathroom upstairs. There's 2 bathrooms in the house, the one downstairs and then this one. And this is the bathroom that the ladies upstairs would share. And there are 3 bedrooms upstairs. It's lots of closet space. So you just got to see our second home in New Orleans. What do you think, ladies?
Way to go.
It's beautiful. Awesome. Congratulations.
Great. Very warm and inviting.
Oh, thank you. We wanted to make sure that we were providing a house for someone that we would want to live in ourselves. And so we believe that when people actually have a beautiful, safe space to live, that they show up beautifully every single day. So I'm so excited that you love it as much as we do. Blessings. I want to thank our guest, Norma Kupion, Faith Leach, Sarita Steib, Nikki Murkison, and Kashana Hill for lending their voices and joining us in changing the narrative of reentry for women, girls, and families who are impacted by incarceration. Every story told gives us insight. Every step taken creates an impact that leads to reform and solidarity in our community. To find out more about the Ladies of Hope Ministries and support us in furthering our mission, please text THELOHM 2020 to 41444. That's text the LOHM 2020 to the number 41444.